Hi. I am a landscape designer, and I came into this through having worked in prairie restoration and taught at a community college teaching literature about nature. So I came into it with a bias toward native plants. And doing business, you sort of learn to be a little more flexible and not so purist about what's a native and what's not a native. But I want to show you first a graphic, and I'm sorry I don't have a PowerPoint for you, but this is a graphic of the roots of native plants in Illinois. And what you'll see is how deep the roots are on these perennial plants. And what that says to us is that when the water falls, when the rain falls, it will be brought all the way down into the soil by the roots of the plants, which help to move the rain, move the water down into the soil. So one of the advantages of planting native plants, and you don't have to plant exclusively native plants, but including native plants in your garden, is that you get this increased permeability of the soil through the roots of the native plants. These are all perennial plants. They're grasses and forbs. And I'll pass this around. I'm sorry I don't have copies of it, but if you're interested in it, I can probably get it scanned for you. Or if you Google something like prairie plant roots.
Maybe we can put it on the website, the North Center website.
That'd be great. It's a well-used copy, that one is, and you'll see there's marks all over it.
It seems like you could probably, if we write it down, it seems like we'll be able to get this off.
I would think it would
Online,
probably be
right?
online, right.
That
And
Kentucky blue, that was really.
yeah, I mean, they're really astonishing.
Everything other than regular grass.
Another book I want to recommend to you is by Douglas Tallamy, who is an entomologist at the University of Maryland. The book is called Bringing Nature Home. And Tallamy makes the argument that home gardeners can help to increase biodiversity throughout the landscape, not just in your own home garden, by planting native plants. Because the native plants attract the native insects. And the insects they attract have co-evolved with the birds and the other wildlife, so that the plants and the wildlife have, over eons, figured out when something's going to bloom, how you got to get there in order to get the pollen or the seeds or whatever it is you need. So the native plants are key to maintaining the larger spectrum of biodiversity. One of the changes in my thinking that this book brought about is he emphasizes how important woody plants are. And what I mean by woody plants are trees and shrubs, essentially. The trees and shrubs are the workhorses in the garden. So if you're going to plant a tree or a shrub, and you have an option, planting a native is going to make a significant difference. If we can persuade even a percentage of home gardeners to do that, then it's going to benefit all of the natural areas in Illinois and everywhere. And obviously the corollary of that is that there are invasive plants, and that you want to avoid planting the invasive plants, because those plants, the burning bush, for example, which many people have in their yards and which many builders will plant in yards. Do you know what I mean by burning bush? It's the one, doesn't flower, but it has great red leaves. Birds eat the seeds of that thing. They go into the natural areas, they poop them out, the seeds germinate, and so you get this invasive plant. There's a few of those that really overplanted in our area. One of the ones that is equally invasive is barberry, which is the one with thorns, and it comes in either a green, or you can sometimes see it in a kind of purple leaf, and it does well in the sun. It's pretty, but it's invasive, and it's really smart not to plant it. Another very invasive plant is miscanthus, which is the huge tall grass that you see in lots of places. The one that gets, sometimes 5-6 feet tall and has really pretty seed heads. They're really pretty. There's a reason why people plant them, but they're very invasive. So if people get even those 3 plants out of the home landscape, it can make a big difference. So I'm making a case here that planting native plants can increase biodiversity, can help to cut down the interruption of biodiversity through the planting of invasives, and can help you with permeability of the soil. But the fourth argument for putting native plants in your plant palette, and again, I'm not suggesting that you do only natives, is that they're natural to our habitat. They're easy to maintain. They're sturdy. They're not going to go, oh, I have the vapors over the winter and die back. You know, they know what it's going to do. They know it's going to snow in April. So they're suited to our landscape. And what I have here, let me see how many people. I have 10 copies of this. I didn't have time this morning to make more. But if you would like to get a copy of it, actually I need one to talk from. If you would like to get a copy, this is the second page. It's on both sides. So it's a list of native plants for the home garden. And there's
I've got page 2 or something that.
yeah, so you should be getting a two-sided dock
And then, so,
and then a very brief one-sided dock. I started with the woodies because those are probably the most important ones that you can plant. And you'll see my formatting is inconsistent. Probably the most important plant you could put in the ground in Illinois is an oak. And there are lots of different species of oak, but the oaks are the bedrock of our prairie state landscape, at least as far as the trees are concerned. The problem, of course, with oaks is that they're too big for most yards, but they can be planted in parkways. So if the city comes and takes down your ash because it's got emerald ash borer, or for whatever reason you don't have a tree in your parkway and you would like to have a tree in your parkway, call the alderman's office, ask if you can get an oak.
Is it on the list of suggested trees?
It is on the list of suggested trees, yes. It is really the best tree for our landscape. Some other natives that will work in full sun, and I've divided these basically into sun and shade. So parkway trees are generally, you know, they get a fair amount of sun. If you don't have a parkway tree, a tree in your front yard will get a fair amount of sun. Some people have sun in their backyards. So trees for sun, the tilia, and what I've done here, because I didn't have pictures for you, is I've given you the Latin name first and then the common name. And that way you can be as snooty as a designer and Google the Latin name and you'll get references to better websites if you use the Latin name. You'll get references to the Chicago Botanic Garden or the Missouri Botanic Garden or the U.S. Wildflower Association, but you'll get better references. It won't be all nurseries trying to sell you the plant and tell you that it's wonderful everywhere. So the American basswood is a tree that the city frequently plants in parkways. It's got large leaves, fairly large leaves, and it gives you good shade. The hackberry is another nice one. The ironwood is another nice one. And the crataegus, the thornless cockspur hawthorn, and this is where you get to learn Crataegus crusgalli variation inermis. Inermis means thornless. It has pretty flowers and nice berries. So if you had a sunny area and you wanted a decent sized tree, didn't have enough room for an oak, a hawthorn would be a nice choice. If you're like most of us and you've got a fair amount of shade and you want a smaller tree, an understory tree that's not going to interfere with your power lines or get in the way too much, then for sun you've got a number of choices. The Carpinus caroliniana, or musclewood, is a beautiful tree, and what's partly really pleasant about it is that its bark looks like a very muscled arm. So it's got a really nice shape and a nice color. It's a small understory tree, no flowers. You probably all know flowering dogwood. It didn't used to work in our area because it doesn't like totally awful temperatures. We seem to be now borderline. I have one right next to my house. It's on the south side of the house, so it gets, and I'm on an alley, so it gets a fair amount of sun, but it's sheltered from wind by being right next to the house, and it's really a pretty plant. And I've planted them for a number of clients, and they're all doing fine, so I think you can safely plant that. Red buckeye is a nice small tree with flowers. The red bud you probably all know. It's going to be flowering in 3 weeks maybe. You can see the buds going all along the branches. It's really fun because it doesn't just flower at the end, you know, it flowers all along the branches. The service berries, there's a bunch of different species, so when it says Amelanchier or SPP, that means variety of species of Amelanchier. They have white flowers in early spring, good fall color. The birds love the berries, but the berries are delicious. And people used to make service berry jam out of those berries. But you'd have to be real patient and you'd have to be real persistent because you have to get them before the birds get them. But it's a really pretty tree. I have one of those outside my dining room window, and it's a pleasure to watch it as it buds. And you know, especially when you can get a tree right outside a window, so that you can look at the crown of the tree. These short trees are really nice for that. The Cornus alternifolia, or pagoda dogwood, is called, it's an Illinois native plant, so the word pagoda in there is a little bit distracting. But it's because the branches go out horizontally like this. So there's, you know, horizontal branches here and here and here and here, and then they get a little shorter up here. So, and it's got dogwoody looking flowers on it too, so it's a sweetie. Shrubs for sun. The Physocarpus, the 9-bark, is a very nice shrub, but the straight species tends to get powdery mildew. So you want to ask at the garden center for a newer cultivar that doesn't get plucked. Do you all know what a cultivar is? Thank you. It's called, we call them cultivars. It's a cultivated variety. So they take genes from the straight species and meddle with them a little bit, or I don't know exactly how they do it. Sometimes a plant will have what they call a sport, where instead of being consistent, it'll have some sort of different variety of leaf structure or color, and then they'll clone those. A lot of plants are clonal. There's actually apple varieties where there is a parent, a single tree that is the parent of all of the apple varieties. It's pretty fun. So there are cultivars of the 9-bark. Sometimes people call them nativars, and there's some debate about whether they are as good for the environment, whether they do the kind of work that the straight species does. So I'm not going to try to answer that for you. I love the red twig dogwood. You probably all know it. It is not the one that has the variegated leaves. That's a European red twig dogwood. The native red twig dogwood just has green leaves. But it has little, not particularly fabulous flowers that start very, very early, almost as soon as it's leafed out, so like May. And it flowers all summer long, and it fruits all summer long, so that the flowers that you got in May are going to be fruits in late June, and the birds will start coming. And the birds love the fruits of the red twig dogwood. And the potentilla is a little short baby like so, with little yellow flowers, and it's a very nice sweet plant. For shade, it's harder for natives, but the two I've got for you are the hydrangea. The straight species hydrangea arborescens, which mostly you buy as an Annabelle, although there's now another one called Incredible. The straight species is a woodland plant, and it is a native. Aronia, the black chokeberry, is nice, and it comes in a red form too, but the blackberry form is a little. So the black one is Melanocarpa, and the red one is